Good morning, everyone. My name is Miranda Stiers, and I am the Capacity Building Program Specialist here with the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I have a wonderful group of folks who are going to be presenting today. We've gone through some of our housekeeping. So for this morning, for anybody who has participated before, you know that we're going to have our opening circle. This is where we find out, and I love that folks are already doing it with introducing themselves in the chat and where they're calling in from and the organization. Today we're going to be talking about anti-racism work and how that works to prevent violence and what you can do. So we have some different panelists from Safe Alternatives to Domestic Violence with Diane Anderson and Kate Hart. They're going to be sharing on their process. Francis Esparza with Haven of Stanislaus is going to be sharing. And then we'll be going through a discussion with Gail Guest-Brown with Guest-Brown Impact. We're going to have some time for Q&A as we go and possibly some discussion time. We'll see how we are on time. One thing I want to do before we get started is, as folks know, we had changed the schedule for the Prevention Peer Network webinars. And I would ask if folks aren't speaking to go ahead and mute yourselves to cut some background chatter for just a moment. Thank you. So we had reached out to folks as the shelter in place began and asked how often folks are wanting to meet and what are some of the needs. We found that folks wanted to meet every other week.
I'm on a business call, honey.
I'm going to go ahead and mute folks right now, just in case your other coworkers are needing some of your attention. So with our prevention peer networks, we'd found folks wanted to meet every other week to help ease what that's going to look like. And for consistency, we are going to be meeting on the first and third Thursday of each month from 10:30 to noon. If the webinar is going to go longer, as sometimes they do, then we'll send that out in the announcement and then have it in the registration. And the Zoom link that you clicked into today is the Zoom link we will use ongoing. So if you have previous calendar invites, I would encourage you to go ahead and delete those and download the new one with all of the dates. And that goes all the way through December now. And we will not be changing those dates. So thank you everyone for your patience. With that, if folks can just continue to check in from where they are, your name, agency, and location, and your pronouns, please. And I love that so many folks are doing that already. And we have folks from all across the state, which is phenomenal. All right. Perfect. So please keep those introductions coming so we know who all's here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and let me go ahead and stop sharing. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kate and Diane with Save in Fremont.
Okay, great. Thank you, Miranda. So my name is Diane Anderson. I am the interim executive director at Safe Alternatives to Violent Environments in Fremont, Southern Alameda County. And I had some correspondence with Miranda, and they invited me to come and speak to you about some of the really positive transformations that have happened in a short time in our agency. And I think, and I'm pleased to do so, because I think we all need a little bit of positive news these days that that the work that we're doing has impact. So that's what I'm going to share, and Kate holds part of the story too, so she'll jump on when I finish my little part here, which is short, to say that at the time of the last conversation, our agency was in the midst of an ED search that began in February and was then somewhat arrested because of COVID. And that before the conversation happened, the last PPN conversation, the board had already begun interviews with some candidates and had promoted somebody for further interviews. And so we were kind of deep in the process at that point. And then the conversation happened, and at least half of our board joined that conversation. And during that meeting, they were sending me texts and they were sharing things in the chat, but mostly sharing texts to say, wow, like they're really speaking to us, aren't they? And I said, yeah, they're really speaking to us. This is relevant to the work that we're doing. And the board continued with the interviews with the candidate that involved stakeholders and staff. And they took it upon themselves to even reach out to Colsaria to invite her to participate in those interviews. And Colsaria was so gracious to sit in on that process. And that was really an out-of-the-box activity for our board to do, to really try something different and to reach out to somebody else that they were inspired by and to get some guidance. And after the series, the next set of interviews that happened after the conversation, and the feedback the board received, where it was clear that this was not the right candidate.
Diane, are you still able to hear us? Because I think you're frozen.
Maybe I can jump in since Diane
Thank you.
seems to be frozen. So I'm Kate, I'm the Director of Programs at SAVE. And I think where Diane was headed was, once this interview process, oh, she's back.
I am just cut off all of a sudden. So it was very dysregulating to board, had some real authentic conversations around what the process was like for us, what the process was like for them, and how we could really partner up to do this process differently. And
so, oh, you're back again, Diane. You want to keep trying?
Yeah, I wonder why our EC internet is so unstable. Where did it leave off at?
The process was dysregulating.
The process was dysregulating for the board and led to some really authentic conversations around what it's like for us as staff, how it's creating a lot of anxiety for us, what it's like for them as the board members, and how we could do this process differently and what needs to be done as part of this process. And that has been really a nice shift to kind of try to walk alongside each other rather than in a hierarchy. So now, Kate, go ahead and take it away from there. What's happened since that time?
So the other sort of piece that's happening parallel to this sort of rethinking how we're doing the ED search is that our board president brought to the rest of the board the idea of them engaging in some real intentional diversity, equity, inclusion work. And she did that not knowing that conversations about doing that work with staff in the agency had already been happening. And I had made it kind of a goal this year to really dig deep and bring in a consultant and really do the DEI work right and well. So that was also sort of starting to percolate, and then the opportunity to do the cross survey came up, and I thought, well, that's a great way to just kind of like get our feet wet and get moving on the topic while I figure out which consultant and how are we going to pay for it and how's that all going to happen. So all of those things were already happening when Unity, our board president, approached the rest of the board about them doing that work. And when I heard about that, I immediately reached out to Unity and said, it doesn't make sense to do this in sort of two separate spheres. All these good things are already happening. It really makes sense to, create a team that's board and staff and move the whole project of doing diversity, equity, inclusion work together as a whole agency team. So she was right on board with that, and I'm super happy to say that we're going to be launching the cross survey amongst board and staff in the next couple of weeks. And we've got a little core committee put together. We're going to probably add a few more folks to that. I think we have, solid commitment across the agency to doing that work in a really meaningful, thorough way, and not just a kind of, you know, we did it, we can check the box and say we did it, but I think really in a way that's going to lead to sustainable change in the agency.
Yeah, and then that's the cultural responsiveness organizational self-assessment tool, correct?
Right.
Perfect.
Sorry, made an
No,
assumption everybody would know what we were talking about.
It's absolutely fine. And I'm going to be putting a link to that in our chat for folks. Let me see. And you're getting a bravo from Mercedes Toon, who leads our COROS project. And thank you so much for sharing. I know you only have a few minutes. Would you guys be willing to share some things as you continue on this journey later on?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Mercedes. She has shared the CROS survey link for everyone to be able to access, and that is available for everyone. And thank you so much for sharing today and for your board members who are joining and participating in the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know we will be talking again very soon, so thank you. With that, I believe we are turning over, or were there any questions that folks had?
That's one of our board members. That's nice.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I love that it's board and staff all together. It's the only way to really get that change. Thank you.
There's
Right.
hope. There's hope for everybody to make change. And I love the comment that, you know, being uncomfortable is not the same thing as being unsafe. Miranda, you had said that to me. And being dysregulated is a good time to look at what can we learn from this process and this experience. And it's challenging. It's definitely challenging. You know, for Kate and I, who have been with this agency a long time, it's still challenging. It's still not easy to feel safe all the time in having the conversations that need to be had. But part of the conversations for me with our board were to understand that it's also hard for them to be tasked with the expectation of doing things a certain way and not having guidance necessarily on how to do things differently. And so to hold space for, we can do this together if we lean on each other and really do walk alongside each other. So I think that's hopeful for everybody to be able to get there in their agencies, but it's not easy and there's still a long road to go.
Thank you so much for that. Part of our organizational agreements and how we as the partnership communicate with each other, one of our agreements is feeling uncomfortable is not the same as feeling unsafe. And so being open to those very challenging conversations and definitely any supports that we at the partnership can offer, and please let us know. Thank you. All right. We have Frances Esparza with Haven Women's Center, and Holly Grace, are you going to be joining that piece as well, or?
Yeah, I'm going to follow Frances's lead, and I'm here as well. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So Frances.
Good morning, everyone. Am I good to go, Miranda?
Yes, absolutely.
I am with Haven Women's Center. I am a shelter case manager. I've been with Haven Women's Center for 12 years, and I've been part of the Next Gen group that we developed here with Haven since the beginning. So a little background about it, because I know Holy Grace touched on it last time we met, but I don't know if she really knew the background of it, but I've been here since the beginning. So Haven's Next Gen grew out of the regional Next Gen that was a project hosted by my sister's house. And so I feel like we began doing that with my sister's house. And somewhere in 2012, maybe 2013, I remember doing my first Stepping Stone conference with my sister's house in 2013. So I feel like it around there, somebody was already doing the work, and then I stepped in, and this was outside of the agency prior. I feel like we brought it to the agency in 2014, if I can remember. And we started with our next generation and hosting a committee within our agency. And we had one person per department join in that meeting. From there, we applied for a cross grant sponsored by Crosspoint, and Steve Liu was our facilitator for those meetings, and we met with him. And out of the Next Gen group, we had like 8 individuals, because it needed to be a small, intimate group. We took 8 individuals that did that training, which lasted for about 6 months. And we worked on implicit bias in that core group. And then after that, I think like in so that was in September of 2017, we started that for like 6 months. In 2018, we developed our own Courageous Conversation to train, like Holly Ray shared last time we were here, new hires and all staff. Since then, what we've been working on are subcommittees. For example, we broke down into 4 or 5 subcommittees. We have like language access. We have the Courageous Conversations, Hear Our Voices, and then community outreach. And in the community outreach, we also added some more layers to that. And there's so much to add that we only focus on a few more layers. And one of those was like mental health and substance abuse, religion, and LGBTQ community. And also we started a hiring committee to look at our hiring practices and what that looks like and how we can change that to become more all-inclusive. So those are some of the things that we are currently working on. One of the conversations that we have been, and I think we talked about this last time we met, were challenges with the board and what we have, the challenges that we did have, and with funders and losing some of those. And so our goal is also, in addition to training all the staff and volunteers, we also like to have our board members do our implicit bias training. Now, in 2018, I took a 56-hour cultural diversity training, and our vice president on the board happened to be part of that training, which was great because now we have an ally on the board. And so we've had many conversations about introducing this to our board. we will be reaching out to her again to see how we can make this process happen, because it has been evolving for a long time, but it also feels like it's been a slow process. Does that make sense? So, if anybody has any questions, more on history or struggles, I can try and answer those questions.
Hey, Frances, did you say you guys have been working on this since 2014?
Holy Grace, did you feel like there was anything more I should shed light on?
Gail, I think that was your question about when we started, and I do think she had said it was 2014 that it's kind of spearheaded.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really inspired by that work. You know, progress is slow.
Okay,
Change is slow sometimes, but it's been steady.
We do like to, when we first started doing this, I did talk about I want to say somewhere around there. It could be 2002. I mean, it could be 2016 actually, but yeah, 2014, 2016. We also right, it has been steady, and one of the biggest concerns is safety, and it's always been like people feeling safe. And again, that was my piece on our whole training was around safety, because you're in a very vulnerable space, and you know, especially when you have supervisors, because I'm not in any kind of lead or supervisor position. So for me, at the beginning of this work, it was very, very intimidating. And I didn't necessarily feel safe, not that, and it was like feeling uncomfortable speaking my mind and getting comfortable with being able to speak my mind. And that also took like 6 months to get really comfortable in speaking my mind, because you know what might happen as a result of me speaking my mind. But recently, we had our next gen meeting, and somebody said, I like calling it, instead of safe space, a brave space, because it really does take bravery to have these conversations. And I really, that really resonated with me, because I feel as I immerse myself in this work and in racial equity, the more braver I become. So that bravery statement is really hitting home with me. Especially
hey, Frances, I'm just curious about where that bravery comes from. Frances, I'm just curious about where the bravery comes from. How do you muster the bravery?
So, you know, just talking about the bravery and just stepping out of your comfort zone and being stretched is definitely challenging. It's been challenging to address white fragility. And it takes a lot of courage to have those.
He's driving.
You know, like I said, it took me a long time to do that, and I think it has to come from my passion, and to put my passion before my fears. Mm-hmm. So doing this work, and you know, and my history with discrimination, and you know, I think a lot of times my experiences with discrimination had hindered me and intimidated me, and it's just becoming developing that passion.
Wonderful.
And I know what you're talking about with that addressing white fragility, and how are folks going to respond to that, and how are folks going to be responsive for that. And my invitation for white folks on the call and in organizations is be open to seeing that as you're having these conversations, you're engaging in these courageous conversations and talking about folks are sharing their experiences. Hear that. Hear what those experiences. Go ahead.
I remember when we first started our implicit bias training, most of the facilitators were people of color, and sometimes it felt like us educating people of color, educating Caucasians was not always received when we talk about white fragility. So we reached out to white allies. And I feel like that's been more receptive. And so white allies are very important to this work also.
So what are some of the ways that white allies can show up for folks? How has that shown up in your work at Haven?
Well, one thing that we are talking about right now is we were talking about, actually we had a conversation, and this is just something we're having a conversation about, is having maybe like a book club, or not a book club, but just educating people. We're talking about how do we get them educated, because one of the challenges is having people do the cross training and having them take the implicit bias test. I mean, the courageous conversation training. One of the things that we require when we do the courageous conversation is to do the implicit bias test. And so maybe we'll have a group of 10, because we like to keep that small and intimate too. And so out of that group of 10, maybe one person will take the implicit bias test. And then throughout the training, you know, every day we're saying, and we do it like, it's 3 days within a week, and we break it up because it's a lot of heavy work and for self-care. And so we're talking to these people, please take the test. So that's been a challenge to get people to even do the Harvard implicit bias test. And so one of the things we talked about reading as an agency is the White Fragility book, to get even that going, and having discussions around that. And so one of the things we talked about is maybe a white ally taking on that project.
Yeah, I've offered to do that. We have an all agency meeting monthly. And so that's my next task, is just making that opportunity available for people. And again, keeping groups small. Now that we're living by Zoom and meeting virtually all the time, we can very easily use that platform, you know, to have a large group, but then break into smaller subgroups with facilitation to make sure that we're really exploring ourselves and not falling into the languaging even that I use, like, well, white folks really need to do such and such. Well, you know what? I need to do that. Not those white folks over there. It's like this white lady right here also. And then calling my peers to the work, you know, and not expecting folks of color to do all the training and the educating, and like, let me just sit here while you fill me with all of your wisdom about your life experience. Like, there's a lot of life experience ready for the taking. Go watch some videos, listen to some podcasts, read some books. It's incumbent on us, I think, to do that work, and to be part of Courageous Conversations has been really great. So when there is white fragility in the room, being able to say, yeah, I've had moments where I felt like that too. And like, we're going to move this forward. And like, let's just be uncomfortable together. And, you know, we can survive this. Like, this is the work that needs to be done right now, for sure.
And absolutely, Gail, that it's doing that extra work, and that's being an ally. It's showing up, being present for these conversations, being willing to have those challenging conversations, and doing your own education. I know that was something that I had to learn as I was taught that being responsive, sorry if you can hear her, being responsive was, or just asking people about, like, tell me about your life, and having to take that moment of, through that trauma-informed lens of, if I'm asking people to unload all of their trauma and to explore all of that for my learning versus me going out and doing my own education and having to apologize for those times when I did put that burden on other people, is a big piece of that allyship as well.
And I think, again, Miranda, for me, a big piece of allyship is doing the work of unpacking my own role in white supremacy and maintaining the ways that I stay comfortable when stuff's going sideways for people of color. And it's not necessarily about a bunch of aspiring white allies sitting in a room talking about how hard Black and brown folks have it in the US. That's not the conversation I think that we need to be having. I think it's really about, it's like we didn't use the term cisgendered for the longest time, because if you were resonating with the body you were born in, you were just normal, right? Big air quotes for anyone who can't see me. And I think it's the same thing with whiteness. It's not like whiteness isn't a race and all of the other races are, and those are what we need to be learning more about. And being able to claim, when people ask about your identities, I'm a mother, I'm a student, I'm an advocate, I'm a lesbian, I'm all of these things. And how often does white not even make it onto my identity list? I mean, these days it does, but there was a long time when, that's the water I'm swimming in as a fish in white supremacy. That's just how our culture trains us to be. So I think where I struggle is having patience with people who aren't there yet. My Facebook friend list is getting shorter by the minute because I just can't with some people. I know where to invest my energy and where to just preserve my sanity. And so, I have a lot to learn. I'm super happy and feel really honored to learn from the wisdom of others that they graciously share in moments like this. Like, it's not an expectation, but I really appreciate it. And thanks, Frances, for taking the lead in your brave space.
I was going to say thank you for supporting me also.
Yeah, you guys, I thank you so much for sharing your hearts about the hard work of being an ally and being an anti-racist. But it reminds me of my my niece-in-law, who is also a white ally and facing consequences on social media with her own family. My heart just goes out to her, right? Because she's really not anti-white, but it can feel like that to her folks. She is just pushing up and lifting up and elevating some systemic issues and problems in our society. So I just want to acknowledge that it's not easy, and I appreciate you for doing the hard work, and hope that you find support for doing that work with each other. And I know the partnership probably will have some means of supporting folks who are brave enough to do the hard work. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chantel. Is it okay to chime in? I'm not sure how to go about chiming in. But I did want to chime in just as a person of color, and just my experiences. I also tend to lead a lot of the cultural responsiveness conversations and trainings and things like that throughout our agencies. Not all of them, but a decent amount. But something that I've noticed that comes up for me as a person of color, and we're having these conversations, is a lot of getting triggered by listening to the exploration of white people as they have discussions with each other in the room. And I just wanted to kind of share that because I think it's important. I'm biracial and I grew up, I'll share a little background just because. So my family, I'm very Southern rooted. My family was the first interracial couple in the entire city. Wow. On the white side of my family, there is some overt racism and some covert racism. And so this has been an ongoing conversation throughout my lifetime, you know, and I've really needed to understand it just given my circumstances and stance in life, right? But something that has come up for me as we're having more and more of these conversations, one side of me is so excited and elated that it's happening, right? But the other side of me is getting triggered all of the time. And I'm in these rooms and I'm watching white people explore their privilege and talk to each other about their privilege, and that's great. But as an observer in the room, it's very triggering to hear those conversations going on. And I think it's important that as we talk about how to have these conversations in meetings and through our agencies, that we also really think about the importance of having those one-on-one conversations when the person of color isn't in the room at all, just to understand the effects of, just to understand what it feels like to be the person of color watching and hearing all of that going on. And I can only speak for myself, but for me, it has brought up a lot of triggers from my lifetime, just listening to the conversations. And although they need to happen, I think it's important that we think about that as we're having our conversations related specifically to our white privilege and our exploration of that and our feelings that have come up around that, that the other people in the room are affected by just that conversation, even if we're not engaging with them and asking for the person of color to educate us, we are still asking them to endure our emotional process as we discover that. And I think it's really important to just kind of note that and keep that in mind. Thank you for letting me share that.
If I could chime in on what she said, I had my own experience where someone had tried to educate me on white privilege. And I was very, very offended by it. And it took a lot. And I think that's one of the steps where my bravery kicked in, because I was very triggered by it. And not only was I triggered by it, but I was offended by it, that somebody would try to educate me on what white privilege is. Because you got Caucasians trying to talk to me about white privilege and and what I felt like they were doing is they were putting their white privilege on me, where I wasn't even in that category. Now, if you talk about power and control, that's different, but that wasn't the conversation that was happening. And that really stirred a fire in me. And when you're saying by being triggered.
Francis, did you guys encounter any of that in your exploration of you know, bringing up these conversations?
Actually, that experience I had, that was even prior to the next gen. That's before we even had our next gen. And so I think that was one of the things that one of the reasons why it brought me to our next gen. But we do address, we do try to, well, no, we don't try, we do address white fragility. But that hasn't came up, like I haven't shared my own experience on how when white fragility is shown, or when people are talking about their white privilege, how it has triggered me or how I am triggered by it. So I guess to answer that question, with me, no, personally, I have not shared that. But now that you triggered my memory and my thought process through this meeting, that might be a good thing to bring in.
So Holly has put something in the chat, but Holly, I wonder if you would speak to that.
Yeah, I didn't want to forget because I have like zero memory. Yeah, we use ouch and oops. We kind of talk about that in our group agreements, and some people are probably familiar with that, but without diverting the conversation in the moment, if someone is having a feeling about the way someone said something or the content of what they say, they can just say ouch, and the other person will say oops, and maybe we don't even understand the ouch, but the oops is like, I see you, I understand that caused some discomfort, and we're going to come back to that if both people are comfortable doing that. So I don't know if others have experience with that. And I've been questioning myself too, like, do you have just a white affinity group? Is it only your white identified folks who get together and talk about white fragility? Because I can see that conversation going way off the rails, you know, without some balance to that. And then also wanting to make space and acknowledge the real pain that comes out of these conversations for lots of people. And I think that what Francis and the original crew who created our courageous conversations was to take our time, right? We're not trying to do it all in a day. It's a 3-day training. It's several hours at a stretch. It's the end of the day where you clock out and go home and process and let it percolate. So I think that has been a real strength of the training. And we skip a day. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So there's some space. And I think it could be even longer. I think it's something we need to be doing all year, to be honest. Not a one and done kind of training at all.
I like the oops and ouch. I have heard of it before. And I just want to acknowledge Chantel, and I don't know who spoke after her, but the people of color on the phone who may be triggered in spaces where we're talking about the white experience, or, you know, and asking people of color to explain. We call it white splaining. But so, you know, we haven't, you know, when I grew up, we were taught never to talk about race, politics, or sex at work. That's what my folks taught me. So we are not accustomed to talking about race in mixed company. We're not accustomed to talking about race at work. These are the things we were taught, and it's challenging to do it. And I think we have to acknowledge that, you know, we absolutely have to speak up when we get an ouch, because people don't, that's how people come to know that may not feel good to you. So we definitely have to speak up, and we have to give each other some space and grace as we try to reconcile our various perspectives. And, you know, we all came up in different scenarios. Chantel, I share those Southern roots with you. I also come from a very mixed race family. A lot of mixture in my family as well. So I am trying to just give people some space, because we have to talk about it, and we can't we're not going to talk about it perfectly. And we have to find the patience for people. I was reminded that in the 60s, we had a lot of white allies that got on buses and rode into the South to help. And, you know, this was back then. Do you think they said things perfectly? You think they didn't piss off some Black folks with things they said when they got on those buses? But they were on those buses, right? So, I mean, I think we have to recognize the world we come from, the sea, you know, the water we swim in. And it's just so different. We just come from some different areas, and we have to give each other some space and grace to grow in these conversations, and learn from each other. But I feel you. I mean, it's not easy, and sometimes it's even painful. And still we have to go on, right? Get off my soapbox.
Thank you. And please, your soapbox is beautiful, so keep doing it. Was there anything else, Francis and Holly Grace, that you wanted to share? Any other questions that folks had?
I did just want to piggyback, if I can. This is Chantel again. I just wanted to appreciate Gail's comments and feedback, you know, and kind of just clarify, you know, I think that while expressing, you know, kind of the triggers that come up, one thing that I want to make really clear is that I don't think that the solution is to not talk about it any longer. I think it's really important, though, to Gail's point, to acknowledge what that feels like, to be appreciative if that person is in the room, and to call it as we're feeling it, versus letting that happen without acknowledging it. And so I just appreciated Gail's feedback and her comments, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Chantel.
I also agree with Gail about extending grace too, to people who do have white fragility, because, you know, it is something hard to hear and to receive when you're trying to educate somebody on white fragility. And I do feel like we do need to extend grace and make it also safe or brave for that person, and allow that person some time to, because I'm a processor. And so sometimes it takes me a day or two to process all my emotions and feelings and thoughts. And so, you know, that's not to say other people need time to process too, and to receive. But I definitely wanted to also mention, you know, our training is about 8 hours. And like Holly Grace said, you know, that's not nearly enough time for this conversation that we have. And, you know, every time I talk about it, I say we need more time, you know, because it's so much, and we're just barely touching the tip of it. So I would like to see like a 56-hour, 60-hour training that we could do.
Yeah, there was some notes in the chat about Robin DiAngelo getting all the press, and there's been a lot of writers, Black writers and brown writers who've written on fragility. And, you know, I will say this about Robin DiAngelo, is she revealed so much about whiteness that I couldn't know because I haven't been in that experience. And one of the things she talked about was the challenge to white authority, right? And so that Black people it's part of our culture, our white supremacy culture, is that, you know, you don't challenge my authority as a white person. So, and it, you know, so for them who don't even understand all of this, haven't had to think about whiteness and what privileges and whatever else it comes, if they don't even get that, then they're not going to read a book about by a Black person telling them about whiteness. I wouldn't read a book about Blackness from a white person. I mean, I just wouldn't, right? So her voice is valuable in this time, you know, her book is valuable. So I just wanted to say that about that. And I still read all the other books too, right? But in terms of being a white ally, and she speaks to her folks, and I'm glad she's there, right? Anyway, enough about that.
Just to speak to, you know, patience with the whole process, something that was taught to me really early on was to understand what it takes for a white person to become an ally sometimes, and what sacrifices have to be made within their personal life. So for an example is, for my mother to marry my father, right? She had to leave her family behind to do that. Not only did she have to leave her family behind, but as she became more of a white ally and began to speak about these things, she had to leave some of her friends behind, or some of her friends left her behind. Then on top of that, all of the ways that she saw herself and everything prior to exploring all of these things in regard to her whiteness, right? Now she looks at herself completely differently. And some of the things that she thought she earned, she doesn't feel like she earns anymore. And all of those things are so difficult to unpack and explore. And I think that if we're able to understand those things and what we're asking of people as people of color, or white allies that are trying to, you know, gather more white allies, right, through these types of conversations, that we can meet that with compassion. And, you know, given the work that we do, compassion is like what we're good at, you know what I mean? And so we can meet that with compassion, and through that compassion, we can then have patience for the process. Because the fact of the matter is that, to your points, right, we're not going to have this conversation in 8 hours, and then that's the last time we're going to have the conversation. We're going to repetitively have these conversations with the same people over and over and over again, till we're exhausted, until we might run out of patience. And if we can just hold on to that portion of compassion that understands what another person has to go through in order to discover these things and in order to make these changes, I think that can help us with having longevity through the process.
Thank you, Chantel. That was so well said. And I want to, when I have a resource slide on my deck that offers resources, this is a particularly tough time for Black people and brown people. And there are resources to get support for you. I know personally my business has bloomed, and every person and every entity that I'm connected with has asked me to speak on one issue or another around racial equity. And I imagine it's like that for all the people of color in my circle. People want to know more. They are curious. It's opened that up. It's, you know, and that's great, but it can be exhausting, right? I am personally invigorated by it. It's a pivotal moment in our history for me. And so I want to be part, I want to meet that moment. I want to do all I can do to be there. And it's exhausting. And so you have to be sure to take care of yourself. And there's a particular resource that I love called Safe Black Space. And we'll provide some information. I'll put it in the chat that you can go and restore and regenerate that support for yourself. And so that you can, you know, be full again and have more to give.
And Gil, do you want to start with your slides now?
Are we finished with Haven? They were so amazing.
I know.
I know.
And I know Francis had expressed some anxiety, but you are phenomenal, Francis.
I just know that I had a couple side chats to me asking for like the names of the training that our original Next Generation crew went through that kind of prepared them to develop courageous conversations.
That was through Crosspoint.
Crosspoint, okay.
Well, wait, Compass Point, not Crosspoint.
Oh, Compass Point.
I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. And I probably could have said Crosspoint. I don't know why I had Crosspoint in my brain.
And then Courageous Conversations was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Francis, but it was Haven created, right? I mean, we use a lot of, you know, other people's YouTube videos and lots of other people's material, but it's something that was kind of pieced together by staff.
Yeah, so the core group that the eight people, staff members that came out of the Next Generation to do this specific implicit bias training with Compass Point, and that took like a lot of work, and that was just the beginning of it, and that was 6 months, and we met once a month for, I want to say, like half a day, maybe sometimes a whole day, to establish this work. And then after those 6 months of our implicit bias training was completed, then we formulated the Courageous Conversation training for Haven staff and volunteers.
And so Haven staff, oh, thank you for Miranda for putting that in the chat, the Compass Point link. So Courageous Conversations doesn't require an outside facilitator to come and do that. It's just something that our staff lead for us, which is nice because we don't have an excuse for why we can't afford to bring in a trainer, you know, all those nonprofits.
Right, but the Compass Point, we did have a facilitator, so we did apply for a grant to get a facilitator to come in and work with the initial core group.
Wonderful.
Thanks, that's all I got. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for putting yourselves out there and being open to sharing that process, Francis and Holly Grace.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Holly Grace, for your support.
All right. So Gail, if you're able to share your slides, or if you'd rather I share and you just tell me when to advance.
You know, I think I'm going to share, but did you want to introduce me?
Yeah, absolutely.
They may not know who I am.
Absolutely. Sorry, folks, I can get into this. Everybody knows who we're talking to. Let me. So I want to thank Gail Guest-Brown. She's an executive leadership coach, peaked in overcoming racial and gender bias, offering women in leadership roles a confidential place to discuss their challenges and create their best solutions. Gail's values for justice and equity fuels her community service work as a certified safe Black space and emotional emancipation circles facilitator. Her service work also includes 15 years of domestic violence intervention and prevention work as a volunteer, an executive director, and founder of From Bruised and Battered to Blessed Ministries. She currently serves on the partnership's board of directors as the chair of Race, Power, and Privilege Committee. Gail holds an MBA, is an ICF ACC credentialed executive leadership coach with more than 30 years of leadership experience at global Fortune 550 companies. I cannot talk this morning. And she is also a Blue Shield Strong Field Leadership Program Fellow. So thank you, Gail, so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am so pleased to be here. I did prepare a few slides that I want to share with you. Be here with fellow preventionist. So, you know, I love this quote. Can you guys see this? Make sure I'm sharing.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, I need to share volume as well. Hold on. I've only been doing Zoom for 4 years. You'd think I would know by now. Okay, so I love this quote by Audre Lorde because, you know, in our field, we know there's no single issue, a struggle, because there's no single issue lives. We all are multi-layered, multiple identities at one place. You know, I come to this talk from a number of different perspectives, you know, so I have worked a lot in corporate America. I've worked in nonprofit. I started in doing domestic violence work as a volunteer, first as a victim. First of all, let me just acknowledge that. I was a survivor of domestic violence myself, and that's how I came to the work as a volunteer. I led my own ministry for a number of years, 15 years, working with the faith community on both preventing domestic violence and intervention work through their community, through our congregants. And then I went to work in the field. So I've seen the field, and now I'm on the board. So I've seen the field from a number of different perspectives. And so just take that in mind. And when I look at this field, compared to corporate, compared to other nonprofit spaces, this field, more than any other place, really holds a value for humanity and for people. And you guys are the most woke people I know. So out of all of those places where I play and where I do work, you guys have the most knowledge about humanity, about intersectionality, about compassion, and about trauma. And, you know, you really are the place to do this work. You are probably going to understand it more than others. I know we are just as challenged. I remember at Strongfield being there to work on my agency. I was the executive director at agency at the time, and being in those first days, of that leadership training, they had the previous cohort come in and talk to us, and they wanted to share with us about racial equity. And I thought to myself, me and Tracy Lamb, we were going through, we had just come through this full day, and we're like, oh my God, we've got to do racial equity too. You know, it was like overwhelming, the thought of it. I was just put off by it, and that was just let's see, I don't know, what was that? Just Strongfield. It was probably just not even that long. It's probably just 3 years ago, right? So we are all evolving in this thought of how do we do it all? How do we do all the work we come to do already? How do we make room on our plates to handle one more thing? But I want to tell you, if I have hope for any field to do this work, it's here. you know, I think about, I've seen Intel donate $1 million to dismantling white supremacists, systemic racism. PNC Bank donated $1 billion to look at systemic racism. I mean, these are people who don't care about people. They only care about profits. And if they can put it on their plate, my phone is ringing off the hook with corporations who want to understand bias more, want to have a workshop on bias and how we can get rid of bias in our workplace. I mean, if these areas, I think I have the most confidence that in social justice we'll figure it out. So I want to say that I pull a lot of strength from my ancestors, and I hope you do too. And it took me a little while to get in touch with my roots. And, you know, I am a child of military, so we moved all around. I was born in Germany, and we moved all around. I have experienced a lot of othering in that time. My sister and I were often only the only black kids or one of few black kids in the classroom. And so, but my roots were pretty strong. You know, occasionally we'd go back home to Birmingham. My mother was from Birmingham, my father from Arkansas. And so I have strong Southern roots. And I come from a family of people who get together every 2 years for family reunions. So it didn't take much to discover my family legacy. And when I thought about the fact that my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather was a slave. You know, it hasn't been that long. So my great-grandfather was a slave, and he and his brothers, he was 18 years old when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and he and his brothers changed their name from their slave name of Neil to Jackson. And they decided to go off on their own. They were offered the chance to stay on the farm, but he said, no, we're gonna do our own thing. He went off, he eventually acquired land. I forgot how many acres, like 150 acres in Sprague, Alabama. And they grew everything, crops that they needed for living on that land. But on that land, they had the community school and the community church. So that value for church, for God, for community, for family goes back 200 years in my family. And I find a lot of strength to keep going in these day and times through my family roots. They have a very entrepreneurial thread in my family. And I share all this because I think we have to remember that this is not a new struggle that we find ourselves in today. This struggle has been around for a long time, but we've got ancestors that have come through a lot, and we owe it to them. We owe it to them to push this, advance this cause even further. This is a time like no other. I really think that this time of COVID really put a spotlight on some of the disparities and made it plain. It laid it bare for people to see the impact on brown and black people. So, you know, we found out that there was a disparate impact on brown and black people with regard to deaths, with regard to job loss, with regard to government relief, with regard to trauma. Brown and black people are already traumatized, just being black in America. And then to add this trauma of death, of losing and disproportionate. I wonder how many of you have lost somebody due to COVID? Could you put your hand up in the participants? Have you lost anyone from COVID-19? Any hands up? You go to participants and you can just raise your hand there. Just a couple of hands. Yeah, a few more hands going up now. This is traumatic. You know, even COVID-19 is very traumatic event. Before it's all over, they estimate we're going to lose 300,000 lives in America. You know, I'm going to estimate that before it's all over, it's going to impact all of us. But for brown and Black people, it's going to impact us heavier. Now, I already know 4 people who have died from COVID, 4 already, and 2 still haven't gotten their hearing back, but they're okay. So this is already a traumatic time. And then we add to this the George Floyd killing. And it was just too much. Can I say it was just too much? It was too much. And we saw that explosion out into the streets of activity and protests. And, you know, I'm going to say that this is our generation's Emmett Till moment, right? Emmett Till changed the 60s, the civil rights movement, when America could see how ugly it was. It really inspired people to do something different, to do something more. And I think this is our moment. And we as people are right in the middle of that self button. I mean, that's us in the middle of this circle, but we exist inside of our community, inside of our work, where we work every day, and then inside of a movement, inside of society. We are all impacted by what's going on in our country and traumatized by it. When we talk today, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things. Sometimes I'm talking about white supremacy culture, and I wanted to define that. Sometimes I'm talking about systemic racism, and sometimes I'm talking about white body supremacy. And I love that term by Resmaa Menakem. His book is also awesome. It's called My Grandmother's Hands. And he has done a lot of work around trauma. So I think this appeals to me because of his trauma work and his acknowledgement of trauma in this whole thing. But the white body supremacy is the idea that every white skinned body, no matter who inhabits it, no matter who inhabits it, automatically benefits from it, right? It has nothing to do with who they are as people. But it also says that it holds that the white body in our country is the standard against which all other bodies are measured, and everybody that isn't white is less than. That's what his work is about. So really powerful work, a lot of reading and opportunities to really beef up your background on this. But I also know I would go as a Black executive director and the only Black in my agency, and in a little bit of a white rural town, that I would go to work after one of these police shootings and it would be silent. And that silence is deafening, right? That silence is saying so much. This is a group that if there were a whale stuck in a river, they would be talking about that for hours on end, what they were gonna do, how can we get the whale out of the river? But an officer would shoot a Black, a Black youth or person or female, and there would be no talk about it. And I think that is sad, that we don't have the words to express even our humanity to each other, right? And that seems inconsistent with who we are as a field. But anyway, I put this up because I see a lot of this. It's so much, we definitely agree as a society that the top part is unacceptable. We will not do these things. And if we don't do these things, we're good people. But look at all that we accept on the bottom, right? We go through life like nothing's happening with these other things. And I just think we're better than that. We can do better than that. I am aware that, we have all been taught not to talk about race at work, and because it's sticky, it's problematic. You can get in some sticky places talking about race. I get it, but we have to. And I want to give you an opportunity to share your heart, just a few minutes of reflection, and you can use the chat, and I hope you do, to share your heart in this moment. You know, we're dealing with a lot now with COVID-19. We're working with clients. We've got all this unrest going on in the country. I want to give you a moment. I know you can walk into your agents and sometimes there's dead silence on these issues, but I want to take some time to just share in the chat. What are you needing? What are you feeling in this moment? Oh, I think I got rid of my PowerPoint. I don't want to do that. There you go. Can you still see this? Oh, I cannot minimize Zoom when you are sharing. Okay, sorry. Yep. Can you see this?
Yes, I can see your slide.
Okay. So let's just take a moment to fill the chat up, please, with what are you needing in this moment? And Amanda, for some reason, I can't see the chat. Oh, maybe I just need to move the chat. How about that? Let me move the chat over here. I see hope, continued discussion with actions. Anybody else? What are you needing in this moment? Change through actions, more spaces, real openness and compassion. For white people to take initiative to explore their own privilege and biases and create tangible change, accountability, leaning into the uncomfortable, short-term change sets up long-term change. All right. Honesty. Effort, accountability, love, and compassion. Education. What are you needing in this moment? Energy, yes. Liberation. Being in it for the long haul, not just for the moment. I think we have like 80 people on this. I want to hear from some people. What are you needing in this moment? The chat is quiet. All right, there we go. Colleagues who also want to do the work. Love. Oh, we all need love. I agree. Investment in alternatives, not just pejorative budget cuts into place, right? Respect from the heaviness, respite from the heaviness. We have to take care of ourselves. There's no doubt about it. Participation, strength to educate those who do not want to be educated. To keep these conversations going, to see really what we can really change and don't keep finding ourselves here. Yes, I agree, Audrey. NAACP, you put out a chat, a camp poster that says, we're done dying. We're done dying. Patience and strength to endure. We need to get our government to admit it's wrong and put the money where their mouth is. Bravery that leads to risk-taking, then transformation. Yes. What are you needing in this moment? Change through faith, peace, and hope, not hate and violence. Respite from the darkness of it all. Oh, it is an ugly thing. Somebody amen to that. White board members to step down and make space for people of color. To remember that we're all of different spots on this long journey and hope that we all meet each other with love and compassion at the other end. Amen, says Veronica. Veronica was on amening to something. Okay. It's a very uncomfortable for me in the office. I am the only white staff here. Everyone else is Hispanic. My husband is Black. I am Jewish. He's Catholic. I need honesty and free speak. People are afraid to speak and discuss. And I think we need to recognize our own feelings to be free of the darkness that surrounds us. Love and understanding. That's a lot to balance. That's a lot to balance. I need strength, Cynthia says. Yes, there's a lot to challenge. There's a lot to balance. All right. Thank you. The right balance of celebrating progress and the little wins while not losing sight of how much more there is to get done. Strength and patience to continue holding folks accountable for problematic things that they say, while also having faith and giving them space to learn and grow. Yes, you're gonna need some long patience. We're not gonna do it perfectly. Well, listen, you guys can continue to put that in the chat, but I'm gonna move on because I think we need to acknowledge that this is hard work and you're already doing hard work, right? And so, but to take care of yourself, there are a couple of resources out there that are free. Taraji P. Henson has started a foundation in her father's name called Boris L. Henson Foundation. And they are offering 5 free therapy sessions. And the Steve Foundation is a text line that offers some free therapy. If you're a person of color on the right, Safe Black Space, I'm a facilitator there, and we hold, in July, we held weekly Safe Black Spaces to community healing circles. EEC circles are grassroots efforts to also hold spaces for people of color to heal from, these are people of African descent, to heal from racial trauma, from 400 years of racial trauma. And some, we were familiar with PTSD, but if you live in certain areas of town, it's continual trauma. That racial trauma is ongoing and continues to this day. So a few resources. I think Miranda will have some more at the end. Some resources for you to come and process and talk through things through the partnership is offering. I do want to say that Miranda wanted to make sure that we talked about how do we connect the dots? How do we talk to our funders? How do we talk to our board? How do we talk to our leadership team about why this work is important? And this preventionists have always been privy to the fact that the violence, that the things and the roots here are systemic, right? And they lead to violence. Racism is one of these things, right? It's one of the isms and the root system that leads to violence. And so it is definitely part of our work. We have to treat our whole clients. We can't just treat the lodging issues that she's currently facing. We've got to treat all of the dots, so if we go back here to this root, this racism right here, this is really systemic racism. If I explode that, this is more what it looks like, right? Systemic racism comes with a lot of things, comes with mass incarceration, economic disparities, a school to prison pipeline, all of these health disparities, underinvestment, food deserts, crumbling infrastructures. This is what your client is dealing with. If you're going to treat the whole client, this is part of her history, part of her life. And the other thing is that we know that domestic violence and sexual assault is all about power and control. These are power and control issues. And so is systemic racism. It's a power and control issue. So I hope we could put power and control in the middle of this graph and have all of those things, right? Because it is about holding on to power at the expense of others and not sharing resources. That's what systemic racism is about. Any questions about this? Any comments here? Okay, no comments. You know, I love this quote too, you know. Everything can be changed. Not everything can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So we have to face these challenges, or else our children will be facing these challenges. You know, our next generation deserves more than this. And I know some of you are thinking that these are huge issues, but there are cracks that are starting to happen right now, right? I mean, changes are happening. Who can tell me some of the changes you've seen happen that you didn't think would happen as a result of some of the things happening? Go ahead and open up your mic and let me share with me what change that you've seen happen since George Floyd's killing on national TV.
The simple fact that the discussion is happening in forums like this throughout agencies like mine is a substantial change.
Wonderful, yeah, wonderful. Anybody else?
The monuments that's being taken down that represents, you know, racism at its highest has been
Right.
taken down now at this moment.
Right. Anybody else?
For me, one of the things that really has struck me was the getting rid of the on the racing circuit, getting rid of the Confederate flag. I always wondered about that my entire life. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Probably kept you from those venues, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Right? And yeah, when I see that flag, the hair on my neck stands up. I'm like, ooh, I'm not going anywhere near that.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else?
I can share. I definitely see the need to abolish the police, and I really like how that movement is gaining traction. And, you know, there's a lot of generations before us that have called for these issues. And this generation, I'm hoping, can see this mission through.
Amen. Amen.
That's what I was going to say. I see a little bit more accountability
Okay.
with law enforcement.
Yeah, I am charged by the number of people who who are curious about systemic racism now, and they want to understand it. And I can tell you can't do anything about an issue until you understand it. But I am charged at the number of conversations that are being had around that issue. Anybody else? I just want to say, you know, who thought this could happen? Right? Right? Who thought? We've been fighting this battle for 400 years. And this is happening right now. And so for those of us who think, how can we bring this anti-racist work to our environment? It can happen. Things are changing. Things are happening that have never happened before in our history. This is a pivotal time, right? So I'm going to ask the next question. What are the possibilities in your prevention work? And I'm going to give you either you can open your mic or put it in the chat, but what are the possibilities? How can we integrate this racial equity work in our work? And then what supports do you need to take the next step? You can answer one, all, or any of those questions. You can raise your hand, you can open your mic. Let's hear from you. Oh, wait, we're out of time, aren't we, Miranda?
try to unmute. We are, and if folks are still open to staying on, then we can absolutely continue the conversation.
We respect you. You can put your comments and skirt out if you got to get back to work. This is going to be recorded. You can come back and catch the end of it. If you can stay on, that'd be great. But I definitely want you to consider these questions and put something in the chat before you skirt off.
And for anybody who does have to leave early, I will be sending out a survey along with a link to the recording and all the resources that were shared today. And in the survey, we'll ask these questions. So we really hope that folks will take a moment to be able to provide that feedback.
One of the things I wanted to touch on is what are possibilities in your prevention work. And I think one of the conversations we have had with our Courageous Conversation Committee is eventually taking our training outside of Haven. You know, of course, that's going to take some work, like we talked about earlier. It's going to be a slow process. But that's where I would eventually like to see this going, where we can educate other collaborative, probably agencies that we work with.
It's always good to have a model of someone who's ahead of you. So I think that would be a great value to the field. So while you're considering that, I do want to share a word of wisdom from one of our ancestors, and tell me if you can hear this. All right, I need to find that space. But go ahead and consider that. Put your thoughts in the chat on those 3 questions, please. I am going to find some words of wisdom from Maya Angelou, one of my favorite authors. And you talk about a woman with an amazing history. This one.
As long as I'm going to live and be present, what I really want to do is be a representative of my race, of the human race. I have a chance to show how kind we can be, how intelligent and generous we can be. I have a chance to teach and to love and to laugh. And I know that when I finish doing what I'm sent here to do, I will be called home. And I will go home without any fear, trepidation, some, wondering what's going to happen. But
for people who are watching and they're about to embark on a new year, what would you say to them?
Tell the truth to yourself first. And to the children. Live in the present. Don't deny the past. Live in the present and know the charge on you is to make this country more than it is today. In our country, to make this more than these yet to be United States. And to make Canada all that it can be for all the people who come there with their thirst for freedom and fair play. That's true of Japan. It's true of Australia. We have to do something. We have to be up and coming, up and doing. We owe it. We've already been paid for. Whether the ancestors came from Eastern Europe, trying to escape the pogroms, the little and large murders, if the ancestors came from Ireland trying to escape the potato blight, wherever they've come from, they've paid for each of us already. And all we really have to do is pay for those who are yet to come. Thank you very much.
Well said. A real pleasure. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Dr. Maya Angelou.
The Queen herself. And as we go out, please remember the questions in the chat. Your questions again, what are the possibilities in your prevention work? How can we integrate racial equity in the work we do? And what supports do you need to take the next step? And as we go out, I want to go out to music because music unites us all.
What if Martin didn't stand up? What if Rosa didn't sit down? What if Malcolm didn't man up? Where would we be now? What if Marley didn't get up, stand up? What if Du Bois didn't come to advance us? And Mandela didn't come to teach us? Where would we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. 'Cause it is up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love can change the world. What if Maya didn't speak out? What if Langston Hughes didn't write it down? What if Josephine Baker didn't dance it out? No. Tell me, where would we be now? What if Sojourner never told the truth? Or Ida B. Wells never printed the news? Harriet never went underground. Where would we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. 'Cause it's up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love can change the world. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. It's gotta be all of us to stand up and speak out with all of our love. Love, 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 love.
All right. 3 minutes of NDRE to inspire us and keep us moving forward. Miranda, I'm going to turn it back to you. And I just want to say this, you know, this is a pivotal moment. We will look back on ourselves in the future. When we get out there, we look back at this time, you got to think about how you want to remember yourself in this time. Because I can tell you, it's a time like we've never seen before. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for staying on, some of you. Appreciate you.
Thank you
Miranda,
so
you
much. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have had you and all of our other panelists to share today from Haven and SAVE. And for everyone in the audience who is willing to share, and for those of you who are thinking about sharing, I'm going to go ahead and share an offering from May Rico, who is the executive director at Haven. She had shared, as they have moved through this process and being very open in their stance and supporting like Planned Parenthood and Black Lives Matters and so many other organizations. Yes, we have lost donors because of me. Yes, we have lost board members because of me. We have also gained donors because of how we've been showing up. And we've gained board members who want to work for social justice. And we've had partners calling us and saying, we've heard about what you're doing and we want to help fund you. Most importantly, we've gained community partners from sectors we might have been afraid to be aligned with in the past, which increases our visibility as a safe resource in our community. Having previously lived in the Central Valley, it's a very conservative area. So this is very brave work that Haven Women's Center is embarking on and has been doing for a long time. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to let folks know about, let me put this into a slideshow view. I think it's my first time here. So we have our communities of practice, and I've heard from folks wanting more space for conversation and more opportunities for learning and connecting with your peers. If you haven't signed up yet for a community of practice, please know that these are always available, and you can share these with your, all of your peers and your colleagues. We have different communities of practice that we're going to be focusing on. So we have our paid family leave, and recognizing that strengthening economic supports is prevention. Prevention in Spanish, prevention in sports, shifting boundaries, creating safer school climates, engaging men in prevention, LGBT+ inclusive, and youth leadership. So these are a few of the opportunities that we have available for folks. We have had some introduction webinars, and we do have those recorded, and those are going to get started really soon. A couple of other opportunities for ongoing learning. I've heard that question for folks of what can we do. There's the Move to End Violence, if folks are familiar with them, by thumbs up, or are folks familiar? Okay. So they have a really fantastic virtual learning series that's 6 weeks, it's free. And it's the Racial Equity and Liberation. And there's a lot of tools that go along with that and some community forums to be able to find supports. They also have some really great tools that they've just put out on love while challenging racist behavior and engaging youth in discussions about liberation. Understand by no means this is as comprehensive. There are a lot of opportunities. Some other things that were shared with us are the Michigan League for Public Policy's 21-day Racial Equity Challenge. So that's a self-led exploration, including tools, reflection logs, and discussion forums. And we had spoken about our CROS project, as a couple of folks have participated in the cultural responsiveness organizational self-assessment. And I'm going to send more information on that along with all of these resources in the follow-up email and a post in our resource library. So all of this will be available this afternoon. We also will be leading the Building Change Together training. We did have to postpone our North training due to COVID with the shelter in place. We are moving that into a virtual space. And so that will be available, I believe, in September. And of course, our primary prevention, our prevention peer network webinars. As I said, we're going to be on the first and third Thursday of every month from 10:30 to 12. And on the fourth Friday, you don't have to remember all of this because I will send it in an email. We have a prevention peer network call, and that's open to everyone across the state. You don't have to be a member. All of these are free resources. So really look forward to folks in participation and engagement. And again, just really grateful that folks stayed with us. I know we're over time. So thank you so much, and look forward to talking to everyone soon. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Miranda. I'll give you a call.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Will you save the chat?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
good.
The chat is saved as well, and I will pull the resources that were shared through that and get those compiled for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.